The PAP gives a rare report card about the election and why it didn't get the 65% of votes it hoped for.
Hong Kong sees a spike in COVID-19 cases and warns the pandemic is getting out of control.
And you can pick up your NDP packs from today as Singapore gets ready to mark its 55th birthday.
Good evening, it's Monday, July 20th, a brand new week. This is The Big Story. Hello, I'm Olivia Quay.
And I'm Haryanto Diman, welcoming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. Now you can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Over the weekend, we saw something rather unprecedented, the People's Action Party giving a post-mortem of sorts on its performance at GE 2020.
These reviews aren't usually made public, and it's just the latest in a series of surprises from this general election.
The PAP's 61.2% vote share was the third lowest to date. While it looks shocking at a glance, this figure is actually a throwback to the mid-1980s and 1990s when PAP got between 61 and 65% of the votes.
And according to National Development Minister Lawrence Wong, who gave a press conference on Saturday, the party is unlikely to get more than 65% of the popular vote in the future.
We are unlikely to exceed 65% of the vote in future. The desire for diversity in Parliament, for checks and balances is permanent. It is here to stay. And we must be prepared for this new reality. For now, Singaporeans want to see the PAP in power, but they also want a credible opposition to check on the PAP.
Senior Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam was the second PAP leader to give his take, writing on Facebook that the election outcome reflects a desire for a new balance in politics.
Mr. Tharman also said the results were good for PAP for a couple of reasons. First, it secured a solid mandate, and second, the 8.7-point swing is leading the party to review its own game.
News editor at the Straits Times, Zakir Hussain, is back to take this further. Zakir, there are several top-line figures to look out for when it comes to crunching down PAP's margin of victory. A 61.2% vote share with an 8.7-point swing, but PAP is still winning 83 seats in Parliament. So what is the one statistic that is most telling of PAP's performance at GE 2020?
I think it's tough to pin it down to one statistic. I think you have to look at both the 83 out of 93 seats, as well as the 61.23% share of the national vote. 83 of 93 is significant because it shows that the majority of Singaporeans still want a PAP government. And in many of the seats, these are won by comfortable victories. It's only 22 seats apart from Sengkang and Aljunied, only in 22 seats out of the 83 that the PAP got was the margin of victory lower than 60%. Now that's significant.
National Development Minister Lawrence Wong said 2 days ago that it's unlikely that PAP will exceed a 65% vote share in the future. Is it possible now, mathematically speaking, that PAP loses its two-thirds majority in Parliament if its vote share slides below 60%?
Conceivably, for these seats to cross over, you would need a much further swing away and for all of these 22 seats to be won by the opposition. So yes, technically it is possible at the next election, if some of these issues are not resolved, that in the next election or the next two elections, we see the PAP's margin of victory, go slightly below the two-thirds majority it needs to amend the constitution.
Well, you asked a big question in your insight piece in yesterday's Sunday Times. Does GE 2020 mark a return to the norm of PAP's vote between the low to mid-60s, or is it even the start of a new normal where its vote share isn't a given? Can you answer that?
I think a lot of it will depend on what happens in the next 5 years. Minister Lawrence Wong, I think, mentioned that the PAP lost about 100,000 votes with the 61% vote share. Had these 100,000 voters nationally voted for the PAP, the vote share would have been closer to 64-65%. Now, what needs to happen, I think, is a cocktail of several factors. I think if some of the grievances of these people, if, say, COVID-19 is prolonged and the economic pain lingers for quite some time, you might see more than 100,000 voters actually swing away from the PAP because they feel that, they can't find proper work, the economic prospects are gloomy, and so on. There are also several other things that could happen in between now and then. I think one of the points that the PAP has mentioned will happen between now and 2025 is a hike in the GST by 2 percentage points. That could be something that causes unhappiness, even though the government said it will have a generous offset package. Other conditions, for instance, if, say, the resumption of travel takes 2 years or 3 years, the tourism sector, retail, services, these are sectors where a huge number of Singaporeans are employed in. And if our slump continues for 2 or 3 years, it's quite unlikely that this will be resolved by the 2025 election.
So let's talk about PAP's post-mortem press conference on Saturday. We're calling it a post-mortem, but in our chat before the show, you described it as a preview to a fuller review that PAP does after every GE, which is not even made public. So how come we saw a departure from the usual practice this time around?
I think a couple of things. I think there's a sense among PAP activists that, people are quite unsettled. Everyone seemed to be a bit grim and gloomy about the result when actually they did win 61% of the votes. And I think the post-mortem press conference was addressed as much as activists as it was at the general public. And it was to kind of reiterate to them that actually, look, the PAP's base did support it in the election. Your lower income voters, your huge middle class, the majority of workers, in fact, many of these people actually continued to back the PAP because they felt, they were benefiting from Singapore's economic growth and progress over the years. One issue I think that I think the PAP wanted to address as well through this review was, I think, to explain that it was not just young voters. I think we saw a lot of the commentary and speculation over the past week that young voters and the PAP's lack of ability to engage them well online may have costed the votes. I think that did play a factor, but I think they wanted to stress that it was also your middle-aged swing away from the PAP. After all, these make up a larger proportion of voters, workers in their 40s, 50s, and even early 60s who lost jobs due to COVID-19 or saw their incomes sharply reduced as a result of the circuit breaker. And I think it wanted to set the record straight as well on this. Now, the PAP's postmortems usually involve quite a lot of looking at the data for each constituency, looking at which segments of voters might have lost them, even interviewing activists about what went wrong during the campaign. And usually it's never made fully public, but what happens is at the end of the year, the party leaders will elaborate on it a little bit when the party meets for its annual conference or convention at the end of the year in November or early December. And I think likely that's probably when we'll get a fuller picture of what went wrong at the GE.
Thanks very much as always, Zakir. That was the Straits Times news editor, Zakir Hussain.
On to the latest COVID-19 figures here. The Health Ministry confirmed 123 new cases today. 11 are community cases comprising 5 Singaporeans or permanent residents and 6 work pass holders.
There were also 2 imported cases who had been placed on stay-home notices upon arrival here. Migrant workers living in dormitories continue to form the bulk of the remaining cases, and the total number of cases in Singapore is now over 48,000. More details will be released later.
In other local news, SBS Transit has fitted protective shields on 6 buses to minimize potential contact between bus drivers and passengers. It's part of the 2-week trial to determine the effectiveness of such screens in reducing the risk of COVID-19 infection. The shields are locally made and modelled after the ones being trialled in Comfort Delgro taxis.
While Phase 2 of Singapore's safe reopening allows dining in at eateries, it's still not quite business as usual, especially at once popular night spots where the idea of TGIF is a lot more subdued.
Now, multimedia correspondent Sam Jo paid a visit to Holland Village last Friday for this report.
Friday evenings in Holland Village are usually lively affairs with large crowds out on the streets and music blaring from bistros and bars. These days, however, the once bustling Lorong Mambong has taken a quieter turn because of COVID-19 safe distancing measures.
I think it's a little bit sad and it's a little bit eerie now as well because the street, as you can see, is not as busy as it used to be. Even though there are a lot of people walking around, you don't get the same vibe, you don't get the same kind of energy that we used to get.
10:30 is your 3 a.m. in Holland, 4 a.m. in Holland. That's it. Yeah, it's just very bad for businesses.
Holland Beach has never been like that. Like before the policy came out where you have to stop drinking at 10:30, like there were tables on the road itself.
Since the start of Phase 2 on June 19th, F&B outlets have been welcoming customers back, but operators say it's far from business as usual.
In terms of business, it fell like 95%. Pre-COVID, we were allowed to use the outdoor area. Now, being in Phase 2, outdoor area is currently banned, so space is limited. So sales has improved from the circuit breaker days, but definitely doesn't justify the same figures as we see during pre-COVID. We do have a large number of fans that enjoy the live music. Because live music is not available now, a lot of them do not visit Walla Walla at this point. But a lot of regulars too still come by.
Last month, British Indian Curry Hut was ordered to close after crowds gathered at the restaurant. Authorities said it failed to enforce safe distancing measures. Since reopening, business has been tough.
Business has been dropped in Phase 1 about 60 to 70%. And after the Phase 2 open, our operating is about 40 to 50% in the business downturn. Last time, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is more lively. Like you can see, most of the families, youngsters and corporates are coming out for dine-in. But now you see it's mostly youngsters who want to come in. Family are still scared to come in and dine in.
While some adapt to survive, others have shuttered for good. F&B outlets such as Beer House Starker ceased operations recently.
The more restaurants and bars that close, then the fact is that a place like Holland Village is at danger of losing its charm, of losing its buzz, of losing the whole, I want to say almost point of its existence almost, but yeah, it's kind of headed in that direction and that is worrying.
There's always going to be its regulars because it's in the west side. This is one of the only few west side places that you can come and drink at. So it will always have its resident, its following.
With no clear end in sight for the COVID-19 pandemic, it remains to be seen how businesses will continue to cope and whether the usual crowds and colour will return to Lorong Mambong. Sam Jo for the Straits Times.
Meanwhile, the number of COVID-19 cases in Hong Kong continues to rise with 73 new cases reported today, now 66 of which are local transmissions. As the city struggles to contain a surge in cases, health experts are calling for tougher measures like a partial lockdown to stem the virus spread.
Their warnings come after Chief Executive Carrie Lam described the situation in Hong Kong as really critical on Sunday, with more than 500 infections confirmed in the past 2 weeks. The city hit a record number of COVID-19 cases in a single day at 108 on Sunday, of which 83 were local transmissions.
Joining us to share more on the situation on the ground is Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang. Hi Claire. Now Claire, previously we spoke on how Hong Kong had impressive success in tackling the virus, learning from the nightmare of SARS in 2003. The people wore masks, maintained a high level of hygiene and practiced safe distancing, which helped to keep the numbers in the city low. How then did the flare-up happen? Are the authorities able to identify the source of this new wave?
Hi. So the short answer to this question is a relaxation of rules. From Easter break in April, people were quite relaxed, and then you saw them coming out, tanning on the beaches. You know, it was packed. We had photos of that, and that's because they were cooped up, right, at home for weeks. So, you know, they decided to have a little bit of a sort of a holiday feel. Now, then the numbers went up. Everyone started staying at home again. So this is essentially a repeat. And look, it's not something that is only peculiar to Hong Kong or that we don't expect or, you know, we're not warned of. It could happen here, it could happen anywhere by virtue of the fact that COVID-19 is highly infectious, right? So from Father's Day onwards, the rules were gradually relaxed, you know, then from 4 persons maximum in public gatherings to 8 to 50. And then on July 9th, you know, the government said too many clusters in too many areas. So it was worrying because the authorities couldn't tell, you know, where the sources of infections were from for quite a number of those cases. So health experts here have pointed to eateries as one of the culprits, because when you go out and you dine in, you take off your mask, you talk to people. So this was an aggravating factor that they pointed out, you know, and we've got other clusters like elderly care centers were also one of the hot spots. Same theory here. You have, it's the same theory here with dormitories. You have a lot of people in a limited space, you know. So once you have a case in there, it spreads like wildfire. There are also a number of taxi drivers who have gotten infected, possibly because of passengers and so on. So the worrying thing now for the government is that a lot of the sources of infections are unknown.
Right. Well, on that note, Chief Executive Carrie Lam had announced more regulations to tackle the escalating situation, including making mask wearing compulsory inside any public indoor venue and issuing a new order for non-essential civil servants to work from home. So, Claire, is Hong Kong looking to impose a lockdown like how other countries have done to manage their second wave if the situation worsens in the city?
Yes, at least one health expert from the Hong Kong University, microbiologist Professor Yuan Kok Yong, said today that a lockdown, not a full one, not total, but it would be necessary if the surge continues. Other health experts are saying that people have become relaxed. So they're now telling the public the onus is on you to, like, the individual to bring the numbers down. And right now it's worrying because there are only 196 units left at quarantine centers. Public hospitals may not be able to deal with any more surge in numbers, so the experts have warned. And as it is, testing facilities are swamped. Private hospitals are fully booked for the day or even the week. The private labs that are helping with testing of COVID-19 are also full. People are taking a longer time to get their test results back. But the silver lining is that the government has plans to build quarantine units in Lantau, as experts warn of a winter season wave. So we've got 700 units to go on stream this week. And then another 800 to be ready by end September. So in all, 3,500 quarantine units at Penny's Bay by the end of the year. And then, you know, we have also got Hong Kong's sole delegate to China's top legislative body, Tam Yu Chong, today saying that the September 6th LegCo, Legislative Council elections, you know, that the government should not rule out postponing the LegCo elections. So this is what's happening so far.
Now, on that note, Claire, just to shift away from the COVID-19 situation in Hong Kong, now separately, Britain is also set to suspend its extradition treaty with Hong Kong in a further escalation of its dispute with China over the introduction of a security law in the former colony. What are the possible implications from this move?
Well, Britain is not the first, but it is the latest among the Five Eyes members to cut off fugitive transfer arrangements with Hong Kong. Canada and Australia have suspended their treaties with Hong Kong. And then the US was preparing a similar move last week. And then New Zealand is now reassessing the legal instrument as part of what they call deliberate considered review of its relations with Hong Kong. Now, this all comes after the passing of the national security law, of course. And in particular, we have got the US President Donald Trump, who recently issued to order the end of Hong Kong's special status. And also he started the ball rolling on sanctions to be imposed on individuals, entities, and financial institutions under the Hong Kong Autonomy Act. So when you have all these coming in together, right, in the wake of the national security law, we can expect more countries, perhaps in the West, to actually make a stand and have a position on this.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, for coming on to the show. Always a pleasure to speak with you, and of course, as always, stay safe. Now, we were speaking to Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang.
Good evening, guys. I'm Dylan Ang. Here's what's making headlines around the world. Florida reported over 12,000 new COVID-19 cases on Sunday. The fifth day in a row, the state has seen over 10,000 new infections. President Donald Trump, however, pledged that the virus was coming under control. Despite record levels of new cases nationwide, the Trump administration is pushing for schools to reopen in the coming weeks and resisting a federal mandate to wear masks in public. In France, masks will become compulsory in enclosed public spaces from today in a bid to prevent a second wave of infections. Failing to comply will risk a fine of €135. Similarly, Australia's second biggest city, Melbourne, will make mask wearing mandatory from Thursday. EU leaders have reached an impasse after 3 days of haggling over a plan to revive economies throttled by the pandemic. The 27 leaders are at odds over how to carve up a vast recovery fund designed to help haul Europe out of its deepest recession since World War II. On the table is a €1.8 trillion package for the EU's next long-term budget and recovery fund. In non-coronavirus news, rapper Kanye West has launched his presidential campaign in controversial style in his first rally in Charleston, South Carolina. Here are some notable moments.
My mom saved my life. My dad wanted to abort me. My mom saved my life. There would have been no Kanye West because my dad was too busy.
The rapper, who has previously supported Donald Trump, has left voters confused over whether his campaign is genuine or a publicity stunt. And those were the global updates. It's back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Dylan. Now, closer to home, Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin said this afternoon that the government is considering making it compulsory to wear face masks in public places. This in light of new COVID-19 cases in recent days.
Mr. Muhyiddin also urged citizens to practice social distancing and stay vigilant. If you recall, Malaysia and Singapore currently are in talks to resume cross-border travel for work purposes from August the 10th.
Now, the countdown to August 9th has begun. It won't be the usual National Day parade, but Singaporeans are making the most of it.
Amid a pandemic, this year's NDP packs reflect the times we're living in. Multimedia journalist Kimberly Zhao checks out what's in them.
Today is the first day of collection for the Singapore Together pack. The NDP Executive Committee has produced these fan packs for about 80% of all Singaporean and PR households, in response to an online petition and debate over whether resources could be better diverted to other causes. We're here at Gate Hong Community Club to find out what the residents think of the NDP 2020 fun packs.
我认为能够给1年1次就是好了，就是开心的日子，给一些东西好了，对那些老百姓啊、平民来讲都是好的啦。那些比较特别的哈。 我就不知道他们可以说，听说可以把它捐出去，是吧？这样不是好了。Anything that the government gives, why not?
There are some essential items here that I think probably many will actually need these. So, and it's also per household. It's not everybody, so I think it's quite okay.
Because it signifies the nation's commitment to the defense and the economic success.
A modest but steady stream of people were seen queuing up at 10 o'clock in the morning. They abided by the guidelines to take their temperatures, maintain social distancing, and did not linger to look through their packs. The fun pack has 12 items, most notably hand sanitizers, face masks, and a thermometer, but also comes with celebratory items like an iron-on patch for your mask and a filter for your phone's torchlight. These packs will be available for collection at CCs and residence committee centres daily from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m, except on public holidays. The exercise is set to run until August 2nd. This year's NDP, marking Singapore's 55th birthday, will be a unique one with people celebrating at home instead of a central location. It's a reminder that the COVID-19 pandemic is far from over.
Basically what Kim shared in her video were what are some of the items that you can find in the pack. And of course, it has been mentioned that we'll have the thermometer.
Yep.
Very handy right now. Face masks as well.
What is the most favorite thing for you in this pack?
Favorite thing for me would have to be, it's quite small actually, but I like it. It's this little red sticker. I don't know whether you can see it from where you are. This red sticker. So what you can do with this red sticker is you peel it off, put it on your torchlight on your mobile phone, and then it casts a red light.
Oh, nice. So I guess is the idea for each person to, wave your phone outside your window or your balcony come National Day. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, I noticed also the beautiful design you have on the bag, and of course each design, I think there are many variations of the design on the bag, and they're designed by primary 5 students as well as aspiring artists with disabilities. So great initiative there as well. Okay.
Can be collected starting from today.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. For more news and videos, you can always visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Harrianto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.